Hello, friends. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who have joined today from different parts of the world. I'm Shobha Shukla from CNS and Network for Accountability of Tobacco Transnationals. Right after World No Tobacco Day, which was yesterday, I welcome you to this important session and media briefing featuring the worldwide launch of Global Week of Action to make big tobacco pay for all the harms it has caused. For your information, this session is available in all languages worldwide, to which YouTube provides subtitles or closed captions. Those who want to read subtitles or captions in a language other than English, please follow these 4 steps. And these steps are written in the chat box as well. And those who are watching us on YouTube, you can skip step 1. Others on Zoom who want subtitles in a language other than English, please follow step 1. And the step 1 is go to the YouTube link, which is now in the chat box. Step 2, click on the settings icon then. Step 3, click on subtitles or closed captions. Step 4, click on auto translate and select your language. Bingo, here you go. This session is jointly organized by Corporate Accountability, Network for Accountability of Tobacco Transnationals or NATT, Action on Smoking and Health or ASH, Global Center for Good Governance in Tobacco Control or GGTC, European Network of Smoking and Tobacco Prevention or ESNP, CLASS, ACT Health Promotion, Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance or SIATCA, Health Justice Philippines, ATCA, African Tobacco Control Alliance, Vision for Accelerated Sustainable Development or VAST, Ghana, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, that is CAPA Africa, Global Alliance for Tobacco Control, and CNS. Thank you to all of you for joining us in this historic launch of Global Week of Action to make big tobacco pay. Tobacco, as we know, is the single largest cause of preventable diseases and untimely deaths. Every disease and untimely death caused by tobacco and nicotine products could have been prevented and averted. End tobacco and end nicotine is a human rights imperative. Even one tobacco death is a death too many. In addition, tobacco industry cheats us financially. This session will expose this. Governments and you and me have to realize that we are paying a very high cost for tobacco use and letting the tobacco industry walk away with huge profits. How can we allow the tobacco industry to fill its coffers while we, the people, have to empty our pockets to fend for and suffer all the harms tobacco industry has caused? The financial burden must be shifted from people and communities to the tobacco industry for all the harms caused by its businesses. It is time for accountability and make the tobacco industry, that is the big tobacco, pay for all the harms they have caused to human life and to our planet. Some quick housekeeping announcements before we begin. Participants, especially media, please type in your questions in the chat box along with your name, media organization, and country. We will take up as many relevant questions as time permits in the Q&A part of today's session after all the panelists have presented. Speakers are requested to please adhere to their time schedule, which is allotted to them already. Without any further ado, I would invite Daniel Dorado of Corporate Accountability to tell us more about what is Global Week of Action to Make Big Tobacco Pay and why is it so important. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Shobha, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. It is my deep privilege and honor to welcome all of you to the launch of our first ever Global Week of Action. And on behalf of Corporate Accountability, we want also to thank our partners represented by some of the speakers that are here today and others that have been joining us from the dissemination perspective and other efforts of the campaign. But we are thrilled to be here today. And I have been put with the big challenge to synthesize in 5 minutes to share with all of you why we are here and what we are expecting from the Global Week of Action. Saying this, I much hope that this infographic synthesize what Shobha, our kind moderator, have been already introduced. We are dealing with a big industry that annually in profits more than $808 billion in revenues. And probably, if I need to say something, we are seeing this profitable business that also what makes them profit on is a product that kills more than 8 million deaths annually. So when we try to balance this equation, we are seeing, well, even though the life costs, and also you are seeing here that the consequences of these products have big consequences to the environment, to the health sanitary costs, and also to targeting youth and all the implications that the consumption of these products have for them. So again, coming back to this equation, seems quite worthy for the industry to keep selling and targeting more consumers to their daily business. And that's why we are here. All the partners that Shobha shared and many others all over the world, I wanted to be very clear, this is not just an effort. Many organizations globally, individuals are joining this moment here today. And we are here today to create a specific space to reflect on how governments all over the world can advance a particular provision of the Global Tobacco Treaty, and the panelists that also will be speaking today will jump into more details about this provision. Is Article 19 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Controls that deals with a specific subject that is liability. So all of us will be convening from June the 1st to this Friday, June the 5th, with several in-country actions, as you can imagine. And that's the big goal of this Global Week of Action that intends to be an annual gathering where more and more countries could join and keep sharing what they are doing at the country or regional level. But for this official launch, we are going to hear from 5 countries. I will not go into too much details, but this country represents geographically 3 regions of the World Health Organization: the Americas region, the African region, and the Southeast Asia region, with several powerful activities, and all of them within the spirit to encourage government to act around implementing this specific provision of the Global Tobacco Treaty. Also, you all could be asking a very fair question. Is it possible to get the tobacco industry in front of courts? Well, the short answer is yes. There are some countries that are currently doing, but also it takes time to make this happen. So there are other ways, and that's also where other panelists will be sharing other avenues to start building that capacity. and also other ways to hold the tobacco industry accountable. Saying this, that's the expectation for the week, and today we are kicking off this organizing effort with this global press briefing that we much hope to answer several of the questions that you all have. Well, here is just a synthesis of whom are the partners and what is the event that we are conducting today. But also, if you want to have a big picture or a visual picture of where the actions are taking place, hope this image illustrates some of the countries where activities are taking place, not saying that other parts of the world will not be joining the campaign. There is a petition that we are also launching today, and that petition have already been received endorsed for more than 30,000 people all over the world. So we much hope that all this momentum definitely positions a strong call to make big tobacco pay. Here, I'm also sharing, and I will be dropping the resources in the chat box in a second, other ways the audience can engage and all people over the world to have more details about what's taking place within this Global Week of Action. We have created a website. Also, here is the petition that we are relaunching today. And also, here is a blog that reflects on the past negotiations, the 11th Conference of the Parties that took place in Geneva November last year, in which strong provisions around liability and accountability were adopted, and other panelists will be talking about that in a second. And to conclude, it is my deep honor to formally announce that today we are launching the creation of this recognition, the Jul Dorado Make Big Tobacco Pay Award. This year, we are commemorating 10 years of this extraordinary and remarkable leader that I can call him my dad. And he was one of the Latin American voices that supported strongly the adoption of this provision when the tobacco treaty was negotiation, of course, from the civil society voice. So in honor of his legacy, and hopefully next year, when we come and revisit the progress of this Global Week of Action, well, we much hope that there are several countries all over the world that can continue leading with example and could materialize that vision of holding the tobacco industry liable and accountable. With that, I much hope to being able to share a quick overview of what the stage of today, and I will pass it up to you, Shoba, for hearing of our extraordinary panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. The Global Tobacco Treaty, or the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, or WHO FCTC as it is called, is a legally binding corporate accountability and public health treaty endorsed by 183 countries worldwide. Let us learn more on the liability outcomes from the latest intergovernmental meeting, which is formally called the 11th Conference of the Parties, or COP11, and the role of civil society. I invite Kelsey Romeo Stuppy from Action on Smoking and Health to tell us about COP11 decision and expert group report. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thanks so much for having me. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Kelsey Romeo Stuppy. I'm the managing attorney at Action on Smoking and Health, and I am one of the advocates who works around Article 19, which is the article on liability at the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Most recently, we were at the Conference of the Parties in Geneva, which was a picture that Daniel showed before was at the same conference. That was the one with the tentacle monster. So same time, same place. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Article 19 and the outcomes from that. But before I do that, I have to back up a little bit to COP10. So COP stands for Conference of the Parties. The number is the number of the times. So COP10 was in Panama in 2024. Article 19 had a big role there. And we got a decision, which is a decision. I don't know how else to say that, but comes out of the Conference of the Parties, and it's a binding decision that they have to do that moving forward. So this decision stated that the COP had to have an expert group on Article 19 before the next COP. So before COP 11 in Geneva, an expert group would meet and put together a report. This was the Article 19 decision from COP10, so from Panama. It would suggest that the expert group could collect information about the liability processes around the world, and that advocates, the expert group, the Secretariat of the Convention wants parties to use these tools, and they suggested that the COP11 decision should encourage the recommendations. So we get to COP11 in Geneva, which was last year, and the expert group has come back, and now we're looking what to do moving forward from that. So the goal was to have the decision at COP11 sort of confirm the suggestions made by the expert group. So the decision that was formalized by COP11 called on two major groups, parties, which are the states, the governments that are part of the convention, and then also the Secretariat, which we'll talk about in a second. But the decision invited parties to consider the recommendations and options provided by the expert group in the report, which was very in-depth and involved and a fantastic report. And I encourage you to look at it if you have a chance. When I'm done speaking, I can drop a link to the report in the chat box in case anyone's interested. They also encouraged parties to consider the tools and the resources that were available and were also in the report, and also to share updated information, experience, and expertise so that parties around the world can learn from each other, from what one country is doing in their court system to stop big tobacco. So the other element of the COP decision were requesting the convention secretariat, so the people that run the treaty. And I think this first one is the one I wanted to highlight because the goal is to disseminate the report of the expert group and to continue to raise awareness about Article 19. And I think that's what's so important about this Global Week of Action is that in between the two COPs, sometimes things can kind of slide away for a couple years while we're waiting in between COPs. They're usually about 2 years apart. And this Global Week of Action is doing a great job of calling attention to it and keeping the momentum going. So they also called on the Secretariat to support the parties, to develop a self-assessment tool and a report, to invite the WHO to create a set of policy options, and to continue to update the COP. Thank you so much for having me, and I am happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Kelsey. Now, Debbie Sai from Global Center for Good Governance in Tobacco Control will share with us the COP11 decisions and non-judicial approaches. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Shobha. Let me share my slides. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you to Corporate Accountability for organizing this very important event. Our assumption, and thank you, Kelsey, for the presentation, really excellent, so makes my job so much easier. I'm really building on what Kelsey just presented. Some of things that you've heard shows that we've always assumed that liability meant litigation, talking about the judicial process, and that litigation against the tobacco industry and liability against the tobacco industry would always mean the courts. Now, the World Justice Project tells us that 4 in 5 countries do not have the court systems considered adequate to hold multinational corporations accountable. And so it took a push from the Eastern Mediterranean region, who championed this issue at COP9 to put Article 19 back in the agenda. So I was luckily a part of that process. And it also took COP10 in Panama to formally recognize, as you heard earlier from Kelsey, what was already obvious. So that decision, including this particular clause, that the tobacco industry continues to escape liability and has now moved to new forms of harm. COP10 also created the expert group on liability, of which I was a member, and asked it to include options for non-judicial and administrative approaches. Now, COP11, and I'll focus on some parts of the what Kelsey presented, particularly focusing on non-judicial aspects. So the three specific directions that were advanced in COP11 in this area is that first is a self-assessment tool to be developed by the Secretariat so that any government anywhere in the world can look at its own national framework and ask, do I have the administrative or non-judicial mechanisms that I need to hold the tobacco industry accountable? Now, GGTC is trying to build parallel tools that could help in this process of developing this tool. The second is a policy options assessment to draw on the best practices around the world on what's being done in the relevant international fora, particularly in the sectors of business and human rights, environmental law, anti-corruption law, among others. We're trying to learn the best ways to regulate and punish the tobacco industry. The third is cost recovery, tools to apply fiscal instruments, levies, fees, surcharges. In other words, the polluter pays principle as applied to tobacco. The global economic loss of $1.4 trillion a year is a starting point, but we have yet to cost out the variety of harms and charge that to the tobacco industry. GGTC initiated a bit of computations around the tobacco plastics, and the idea is to be able to figure out what is that amount and how you charge that against the industry. We need more of this. The liability argument rests on three things that are no longer being debated. First, the tobacco industry produces a product that kills half of its consumers, and the industry deliberately engineered its products for nicotine dependence. Second, the industry knew that the addiction starts young and designed the products for that. Adolescents are neurologically more vulnerable to nicotine dependence. Third, the tobacco industry concealed what it knew, and this was established based on its own internal documents. The treaty provision also requires us to ensure that non-judicial measures, such as taxes to recover costs, should be significant enough so that they are seen as a punishment, not as a corporate social responsibility. And we need to ensure that the process to have these measures should be transparent, and there should be no secret dealings with the tobacco industry. I want to close with three things. One, the tobacco industry causes a lot of harm, but we have barely recovered the cost. COP11 has begun to build the architecture to change that. So Canada, that imposes a cost recovery fee in a very limited way, can now use this COP decision to seek an increase in that fee. Victims need to be compensated. The treaty wants governments to deal with tobacco industry's compensation. So if you think about it, even for the COVID vaccine, there's a global vaccine injury fund taken from a tax on pharmaceutical companies. In the environment, there's an international oil pollution compensation fund funded by the oil industry. So why does tobacco get a pass? Third, penalties imposed on the tobacco industry are peanuts compared to those imposed in the field of environment, anti-corruption, and financial crimes. We could learn from these sectors. Penalties could be raised. The special tribunals in these sectors could also be used to try the tobacco industry. Finally, you can say that many different things cause addiction, but remember that tobacco products are not just addictive, they are also deadly. They kill people and they kill the planet. If we can let the tobacco industry go free, then how else can we ever hold any industry actor to account? Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much for such a lucid presentation. Our next speaker is Patricia Sosa from CTFK, or Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, go ahead, go
Patricia,
ahead.
Patricia, can you please tell us more about WHO FCTC Article 19 and the role of civil society?
Well, I'm going to share with you a bit of what we do. And a lot of what we do, it is centered in the Article 19. Actually, we co-chair the working group with our colleagues from Brazil and applied a lot of the principles that are embodied in Article 19. I'm really here to tell you a bit about what we do. As the members of the Bloomberg Initiative for Tobacco Control that hosts the International Legal Consortium. And I don't know if for everybody to know, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids is a global organization that works with civil society organizations on advocating for tobacco control policies. And we have very actively engaged in seeking accountability of the industry and defending tobacco control policies for the last almost 20 years. We have supported defensive litigation when the industry attacks tobacco control laws. By providing and participating as amici and also providing technical assistance to the defense, mostly through civil society organizations. And many of those colleagues are here, actually, our colleagues from Mexico, the Philippines, and Brazil have been collaborators in many of these efforts with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. And we also have been engaged in offensive litigation, particularly on the healthcare recovery cases. And again, we'll hear more. And I think those were many of the cases that were acknowledged in the Article 19 decision, because that's a work that is happening in those countries. And I appreciate Debbie's presentation that is in those countries that have the legal system and the judiciary able to file those types of lawsuits. But there are many ways in which you hold the industry accountable. And I want to say 3 examples of cases that we have been engaged that I think are very specific. And we're going to hear some of it, not all of them, in the future presentations. One of them was that TFK provided financial and technical support to the government of Uruguay when it successfully defended itself against Philip Morris International claims at the ICSID, which is an arbitration court associated with the World Bank. And talk about holding the industry accountable. The industry, Philip Morris, had to pay the government of Uruguay $7 million and issued a decision that basically provided the necessary clarity that health rights are above trade. And that's definitely holding the industry accountable. In Brazil, we're going to hear more from our colleagues in NATT Brazil. We have also been supporting the litigation, the healthcare recovery litigation presented by the government lawyers against British American Tobacco and Philip Morris International. And in Mexico, we have been supporting the efforts of Salud Justa and others in defending the tobacco control regulations against industry attacks in the courts. And again, our hope is to turn it around and make the industry more responsible, turning around what they're trying to do for the benefit of tobacco control. Just for you to know, ILC has experience supporting litigation in over 40 countries. We know how to build strong cases alongside local stakeholders. Additionally, we maintain a repository of litigation related to tobacco control that can be accessed on our website, tobaccofreekids.org, or directly at tobaccocontrollaws.org. We specifically provide direct legal technical assistance to governments and civil society teams. And we open to many of the things, and we've been in countries exploring some of the things that Debbie was sharing in terms of environmental law. That's a cutting edge issue and a very important one that is important and has a lot of potential in countries, as she said, with not particularly strong judiciaries to hold the industry accountable. So we've been working in a number of countries and exploring this issue, Mexico and Colombia specifically. Legal feasibility analysis according to the regulatory framework of each country. Again, where can we enter the system in order to hold the industry accountable? Linkage with experiences and lessons learned from other countries, coordination with academia, international NGOs, and multilateral organizations, and of course, supporting litigation and communication strategy. At TFK, we want to continue supporting these types of cases and celebrate the increasing number of countries demanding that the industry pay for consequences of its action. We're grateful for corporate accountability and Danielle in particular for creating this space for collaboration. And I just have one slide that I wanted to share just to, for those that are not as familiar with the legal consortium, but I'm finding a hard time. Where is the shared? Oh, here it is, share. So you could, so that's a legal consortium, and that explains a lot of what I'm share with you. Particularly, I want to bring attention to those that are interested in pursuing the litigation. We have a repository of all the laws and regulations, but we also have a repository of the litigation going on around the world. So you have an opportunity to, if you want to do something in your country, go into our website and find out if there are any litigation that is similar to what you're trying to achieve and learn from what others are doing. So I'm going to close here, and I will have more than willing to answer any questions about the work of CTFK. Thank you very much, Shobha.
And thank you, Patricia. And thank you for the good work your organization is doing also in helping countries make the tobacco industry accountable. Thank you. And finally, to close this segment, I welcome Irene Reyes of Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance, or SIATCA, who will be addressing some elements of the relation between Article 19 and Article 5.3 of the WHO FCTC. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you, Shobha. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Irene Reyes, the Tobacco Industry Denormalization Manager at Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance. True accountability cannot be achieved by merely shielding ourselves from the industry's influence. We must also ensure that they bear the financial and legal weight of the public harm that they cause. And today we're discussing this powerful strategic shift. And we can look at how we can bridge Article 5.3 with Article 19 liability, turning the evidence of industry interference directly to actionable consequences. To understand where we are heading, we first need to look at the parallel strategy built into the FCTC framework. For years, we have operated under Article 5.3, which acts as our shield. It is designed to prevent the industry from interfering in public health and legislative processes, ensuring that commercial interests do not dictate health policy. But the shield can only protect you from the next blow. It doesn't stop the actor or the enemy from wielding the weapon. It is where Article 19 comes in. Article 19 employs civil, criminal, and administrative enforcement mechanisms to demand accountability for the massive societal and economic damages that the industry inflicts. And true accountability exists at the intersection of these two pillars. We stop viewing them as separate goals and instead recognize that preventing policy influence and ensuring the industry is made accountable are two halves of the same operational strategy. This isn't just an idea, it's a formal mandate handed down by the global community during the recent COP sessions. At COP10, a decision was made to reestablish the expert group on liability, tasking them to develop concrete tools and promote international judicial cooperation. Crucially, it mandated also the group to look into industry evasion. It recognized that to enhance the implementation of Article 19, we must look at it in direct relation to Article 5.3. And at COP11, the treaty's governing body took it a step further. This decision explicitly calls for a synergy between Article 5.3 and Article 19. It requested the development of a tool to help countries identify gaps in their administrative and non-judicial liability frameworks. It also gave the directive to use strict transparency monitoring and compliance data to drive our legal and accountability actions under Article 19. We don't have to look far to see this framework turn from paper to practice. Right here in Southeast Asia, civil society and governments are already using administrative and judicial avenues to make the industry accountable. In the Philippines, last year, a formal complaint was filed with the Department of Trade and Industry against a tobacco company for violating the law. The government agency ruled against the industry and ordered the company to cease advertising violative promotional materials. And in Indonesia recently, civil society groups filed a complaint and submitted a report to the Ministry of Health on massive tobacco and vape advertising online. And the Ministry of Communication and Digital Affairs removed the online advertising posts. In Cambodia, in a landmark criminal case, the court found the tobacco company guilty of violating tobacco advertising ban. The court issued a fine and ordered an additional amount to reimburse the government for its expenses. As we can see from these concrete regional examples, Article 19 is no longer just a concept reserved for massive, decade-long lawsuits. We are showing that administrative actions, enforcement, and immediate regulatory penalties are highly effective and rapid response mechanisms. In conclusion, the message coming up the recent COP sessions is clear. We use both Article 5.3 and Article 19 to hold the industry liable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. We now move to the next segment of today's session, featuring Global Week of Action activities in different regions and countries. And let us begin with the Americas region. I invite Mariana Pinho of ACT Health Promotion from Brazil. Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you. Just a moment. Well, it's an honor for ACT Health Promotion to be part of this global campaign, Make Big Tobacco Pay, promoted by Corporate Accountability. We have been working for 20 years to contribute to public policies for tobacco control in Brazil. Brazil, as you probably know, is an international reference in tobacco control, with the advancement of effective public policies that have been contributed to a significant reduction in smoking in the last 30 years, although we still have a long way to go. The Brazilian government is trying to implement the FCTC Article 19 through a lawsuit against the two largest cigarette manufacturers in the country and in the world and their international headquarters. This action was proposed in 2019 by the Attorney General's office and aims to reimburse the public health system for the expenses with the treatment of 27 diseases related to smoking and passive smoking. It's a very important lawsuit, not only for us from Brazil, but for the world, as the final decision will positively or negatively impact other countries. ACT acts in this process as amicus curiae, an interested third party that can contribute with qualified information to the decision-making process. The sentence is expected to be presented at the end of this year. We have a website of this lawsuit. I will share now. Let me see, sorry. Now you can see it's our website. It's available in English and in Spanish with many details of the lawsuits and a copy of the lawsuits in full. And our campaigns in Brazil have been to demonstrate that the cigarette bill is the manufacturer's bill. They have to pay. I also invite you to scan the QR code, and it will let you to go straight to the website. and then you will invite to sign in the petition available in the website. I will share the link also here in the chat. Let me come back again. The same companies that are defendants in this lawsuit and contest our country's claim have already paid this bill in the United States and in Canada. It is a fact that the tobacco industry produces, promotes, and sells products that it knows causes damage to the health and strong dependence of its consumers and to people exposed to tobacco smoke, with risks of diseases and early and avoidable death. And even so, it's wildly promotes its products and makes use of additives in its products to make them more palatable and attractive, especially to the youth. In addition, as in other countries, in Brazil, the tobacco industry lobbies strongly and powerfully to prevent the approval of effective public policies to reduce smoking, and judicially questions to the validity of these policies, and even tries to weaken our regulatory agents, Anvisa. In Brazil, despite advanced regulatory legislation, the tobacco industry systematically fails to comply with current regulation, such as illegal advertising in points of sales in the country, which has continental dimensions with more than 400,000 points of sales. The U.S. Justice already recognized in 2006 that the tobacco industry is responsible for a smoking epidemic, and that it acts together and in coordination to deceive public opinion, government, and health community and consumers. These industries carries out a business that effectively brings losses to the countries with social, economic, financial, and environment damage, whether by the illness and early death of its consumers. In Brazil, there are more than 400 deaths per day. It's time for the tobacco industry to be effectively held responsible for the negative externalities it causes and that affects all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Now from Brazil, we move to Mexico. I invite Eric Antonio Ocoya of Salud Justa MX. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much. I want to share the presentation about the legal and communication context in Mexico. Thank you, Corporate Accountability, for this global efforts to advance of the implementation of Article 19. This is a brief presentation. Together with other organizations such as Campaign of Tobacco-Free Kids, we have led the strategic litigation against the tobacco companies to defend the progress of tobacco control in Mexico. But now we are facing some actions of the tobacco industry. It's not easy to explain to other regional or global leaders how Mexico went from a constitutional ban of vaping in January of 2025 to the fiscal legalization of nicotine products in December of the same year. We constitute a threat to global public health. This is important not because in the annual reports of the tobacco industry, while Philip Morris International reports that in 2025, 41.5% of the global revenue will come from its emerging products and nicotine products, including its in nicotine pouches, with 43 million consumers and the presence in 108 markets. British American Tobacco highlights that 18.2% of its revenue correspond to these products, with values as its flagship brands. And this is very important because reflects the problem that we have in the world. Let the tobacco company pays have some communication actions. We will present the virtual presentation of the Tobacco Industry Interfering Index Mexico Case 2026, and the infographic with Mexico score in the 2026 Interference Index. And for this week, we will present legal actions. The law of special taxes on products and services legalize other products that contain nicotines for tax purposes. In Mexico, there is no regulatory framework that regulates novel products, such as nicotine pouches, which have entered to the Mexican market since 2024 in the convenience store chains with the most presence in the country. And for this week, we will present legal actions, civil and administrative actions to force regulatory bodies to act and claim compensation for the damage caused by the tobacco industry. And regulators must act directly to prevent abuse, and the tobacco companies continue to do harm and comply with the current regulations. SERAG, a youth advocacy organization, and Salud Justa, we will file at least 3 complaints with Profeco, the Consumer Rights Protection Agency, and COFEPRIS, the Health Risk Protection Agency, to prevent products from being advertised and sold without information to consumers. Let the tobacco companies pay. Let's continue our efforts to stop the tobacco industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker is Willow Najar Anderson of Public Health Law Center from the United States of America. Welcome, Willow.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'll share my screen here, Eric. That was really interesting and great to hear all the good work that people are doing. All right. All right, can you see?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you. I'm a senior staff attorney at the Public Health Law Center, which is a national nonprofit based in St. Paul, Minnesota, but doing work all throughout the United States. And I work there with a team of lawyers and policy analysts. Our mission is health through the power of law and policy. And one of the issues that we are working on is environmental accountability for the tobacco industry. But what this really is about is putting the industry's feet to the fire. Let's be clear, the problem of tobacco product waste is not a misunderstanding that can be cleaned up with an education campaign. This is a real fight. Because if we only clean downstream, the industry gets profit and the communities get all the pollution, cleanup costs, and health harms. This is not an accident. This is a business model, one that privatizes the profits and socializes the harm. And the law is the most powerful tool for change to rebalance that equation. Litigation is one way to preserve the record when powerful institutions would rather blur it. A lawsuit is a hearing, not a rumor, not an advertisement. So sometimes in the fluorescent light of a courtroom, their messaging can be exposed for what it is. We will be talking more about this, and I invite you to join us on Thursday, June 4th, for a webinar about Article 19. I'll be talking about environmental litigation and public health litigation in the United States. This is a webinar hosted by Corporate Accountability, ASH, and the Public Health Law Center. Hope to see you there.
Thank you, Willow. Thank you very much. And sure, that's great work you are doing. And I love the sentence, it privatizes profit and it makes the public pay for the harm.
That's right.
From the Americas, we move to the African region. Our first speaker here is from Nigeria, and he's none other than Akinbode Matthew Oluwafemi of Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. We lovingly call him Bode. Welcome, Bode.
Thank you so much, Shoba. So thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. And just to remind ourselves about just a few things that for us here, the issue of accountability by tobacco companies means quite a number of things, and it doesn't really stop at the courts. Yes, there is the issue of legal accountability, and again, the issue of shifting the costs of their business model back to them. They take full responsibility for the health, economic, social, and environmental harms that they cost. And also that this is a business that has been done on deception. So we needed a lot of transparency when we speak about accountability. Of course, policies, environmental responsibility, and most importantly, again, to be able to take our public health back from these corporations. And for us in Nigeria, there have been some stories. The Nigerian government in 2007 took tobacco companies, British American Tobacco, Philip Morris International, ITC, then to court in a very landmark suit in Nigeria because of their, deception and the fact that they conceal the risks of what is associated with their products. Of course, several years down the road, we're still in court, and we all just feel that at some point we'll be able to see some retrial going on. A lot of people don't really know that this case has not gone to trial till today. Part of what that case is looking for is the recovery of public health costs, and then again prevent future conduct. But I must also stress this, that at the point we went to court for this case, it was part of our advocacy to be able to get the National Tobacco Control Act. In Nigeria, there is what they call, I'm not a lawyer, litigating to expand the legal space, to expand jurisprudence or something like that. Now, these particular suits, majority of what we were asking for were what we again got through the National Tobacco Control Act, but needed to build, that momentum. So a lot of the time, we can also use the courts very creatively in our advocacy. After that is the fact that we also look at administrative procedure in Nigeria, and a lot of people have read about the 2024 landmark fine by the FCPC, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission in Nigeria, that investigated BAT for violating competition rules and other tobacco control laws according to them. And for that, BAT was fined 110 million in Nigeria. And for us, this is a very significant development because it's actually created a precedent of using administrative processes to be able to bring corporations, not only tobacco companies, but in this case, tobacco companies, to account for violating laws because of the kind of businesses that they do. However, this is still not the end of the road, because when you look at what is released to us in terms of what is made public in terms of this fine, we're still trying to dig to what are those the violations that they have to settle out of court. And so it's a welcome development that this global movement is coalescing to begin to build not only national movement like ours, but a global coalition to demand accountability. And going by this week of action, we're going to be doing webinars. We are going to be doing press briefing. We've done a webinar with youth in the morning. And of course, trying to see how we can align whatever we are saying here with other corporate campaigning coalitions globally, particularly for those of us that have been in the global Make Big Polluters Pay coalition. So I'm so glad to be here, and thanks, CA, for providing this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bode. We have with us Labram Musa of Vision for Accelerated Sustainable Development, or VAST, from Ghana. Welcome, Labram.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much for having me. And let me say that can you see my screen, please?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, right. So let me say that the First Ghana is happy to be part of this global movement and to make big tobacco pay for the harm they cause humanity and the environment. Right. So in terms of my presentation, I will leave the global context behind because a lot have been said already on that. But to mention the fact that the first point, which is, when it comes to the issue of the data, many a times some of us are very derailed and devastated on the way the data is being skewed to low and middle income countries where we have 8 million deaths annually, and not only on tobacco alone. When we look at many disease conditions, many a times you hear that there's a toll of deaths happening, but 80%, 90%, 75% of the burden is on low and middle income countries. And I think that this is a clarion call for low and middle income countries, including Africa and Ghana, to change that trajectory. But of course, that this can only be done if we are able to hold our government, accountable, right? To just also mention the fact that in Ghana, we have done some progress with respect to tobacco control. And let me say that I'm happy to also know that Ghana is one of the few countries that are nearing the tobacco epidemic, where we have less than 5% of adults deaf or deaf as a result of tobacco use, which is extremely good for the country. We have made some progress, as I mentioned earlier, having being the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to pass the WTO FCTC. And then also some landmark, history that we made. And the last one specifically is the Act 851 on the excise tax, which gave a legal foundation for excise taxes on tobacco product. Of course, it didn't come easily. There were a lot of industry interferences to ensure that does not work, but indeed it happened. Unfortunately, however, the FCTC Article 19 on liability remains unimplemented. And I'm happy to hear the progress that many countries are doing, especially countries outside Africa and then also the SETCA regions. So in terms of what we have planned to embark upon as we join the global movement, we are also holding press conference, a highly press conference one, to amplify the call on governments, including the government of Ghana, and to accountable under the WHO FCTC Article 19, and then also the domestic law. We would also be conducting a series of media engagements once we are done with the press conference. The next, we would be embarking upon our social media campaigns, where we wanted to ensure that we support the global movement, and then get the youth and Ghanaians to appreciate the fact that big tobacco need to pay for the harm they cause humanity and our environment. And finally, we also joined the global petition and an open letter to our government to take cognizance of the fact that Ghana has played a role in the FCTC. We were at COP 11 and endorsed the decision that was made on Article 19. So we will be doing that with our government to ensure that we advance efforts towards Article 19. Right, so in terms of some few recommendation, we would call on government to implement the FCTC Article 19 in our context, and then also calling for reforms on the excise taxes, which is very wicked now because it has everything to do with human rights to health. We would be calling for earmarking of some of these excise taxes to support the treatment and then also the NCD prevention as well as cessation services. That notwithstanding, we definitely will not be doing that in isolation, but also be advancing effort around the implementation of Article 19. We would also be recommending to government to enforce the Article 5.3. Of course, no intervention within the tobacco control fraternity can't be successful without the implementation of Article 5.3. So we would ensure that government does already. The government of Ghana is working around the adoption and the implementation of a code of conduct. So we would be advocating to ensure that it meets all the key components to hold the industry and policymakers accountable. Right, and then we will be supporting the amplification of the global movement on liability decisions. This is something that we will supporting the global movement to do. Finally, we would also be engaging the civil society community and then also personally with non-communicable diseases. We can't do this thing without ensuring that we bring people who live with the condition, people who are affected by non-communicable diseases, those who contract these non-communicable as a result of the usage of tobacco. So we would also be working closely to them to advance and to call on government to do the needful to protect the environment and humanity. You would find our website beneath the screen. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Labram. And last but not the least, we have Ralph Degolacion of Health Justice from Philippines. Welcome, Ralph.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ralph from the Philippines. Health Justice is a public health think tank, and we've been supporting tobacco control and NCD prevention in the past 16, 17 years in our country. And we thank the Corporate Accountability for inviting us today. Philippines is often viewed as an emerging market, but it is also becoming an important case study in how tobacco and nicotine industry is adapting to a rapidly changing digital environment. Like many countries, the Philippines continues to face a significant burden from tobacco-related diseases. These conditions place enormous costs on individuals, families, health systems, and our national economy. Yet, while our society bear this cost, tobacco companies continue to profit. What we are increasingly witnessing is not simply the sale of tobacco and nicotine products. We are witnessing the evolution of tobacco marketing itself. Our recent monitoring and in the past 2-3 years, we have documented the continued use of celebrities, social media influencers, public figures, and online platforms to promote tobacco and nicotine products. This happens despite a law that was passed in 2022, wherein our country regulates vape or e-cigarette products and the prohibition of advertising on for tobacco products, which was passed way back in 2003. These strategies clearly are designed to reach consumers where they spend much of their time today, especially in the Philippines. We are one of the most digitally active countries in our region and maybe in the world. And they are very, very effective. The industry is very effective in engaging younger audiences. This is not a challenge unique to the Philippines. Around the world, governments and public health advocates are grappling with how to regulate tobacco promotion in digital spaces that move faster than legislation and often transcend national borders. What happens in the Philippines reflects a broader global trend. As traditional advertising channels become more restricted, the industry is now shifting its investment toward newer, less regulated forms of promotions. That is why accountability matters. So, because of our observations in the past couple of years, we in our network not only Health Justice, we'd like to also recognize the Tobacco Control Network in the Philippines, who have worked very hard to really compile all these violations that we have seen in online marketing and advertising. And this, as mentioned earlier by our partner, the Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance, we have taken action by tapping by filing complaints before our regulatory agencies. And this demonstrated that industry actors can be held responsible when they violate existing laws. We have filed at least 7 complaints so far since starting with last year. The ones you're seeing in the photo was our first complaint, followed by in November, and another 5 this year already. Investigations are already is ongoing, and violations have been identified. The first complaint that we filed last year resulted to a victory, wherein our ministry, our regulatory ministry, orders Philip Morris to cease the advertisement of one of their product using a celebrity. That didn't push through because of this case, but certainly more needs to be done, because as we have known, this company, despite this violation or this penalty being given to them, continued with their activity, but without the celebrity. These developments are very important, and this should be, seen as a starting point rather than an end point. So for us at Health Justice, and as we continue to work with our partners from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, YATCA, Vital Strategies, we are continuously working to, number one, work towards revision of current policies. And I think this week, the Global Week of Action, we've seen the start of filing of new bills to actually tighten policies in terms of advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, empowering citizens and local governments to take action, and enhancing penalties on the industry. We are also set to launch a series of videos and podcasts that will discuss more about the importance of making tobacco industry accountable. I think this is something that we need to continuously do as advocates, and we encourage everyone to continuously create online or digital content, because the industry misinformation is really very rampant online, and we need to fight back, and we need to make sure that our people understands why the industry needs to be held accountable. So I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I will be glad to answer questions if there are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And now we open for questions from the audience. Participants, especially media, you can type in your questions in the chat box. We already have a few questions shared by the participants while they were registering. So I will ask those questions which are already there with us. The Global Week of Action to Make Big Tobacco Pay is culminating with the World Environment Day on June 5. Is it strategically planned to expose environmental costs of tobacco businesses which currently are foisted on the communities and the government? Any speaker can answer. It's not directed towards a particular speaker. Any of you who would like to answer the question?
Well, maybe I can
Yes.
start, but I'm sure that maybe Debbie,
Yes.
Willow, or Kelsey may have some inputs on this front.
Yes.
Well, definitely that's also why we are launching the Global Week of Action today. Yesterday was World No Tobacco Day. Well, definitely, I much hope that all these opportunities that could be around could be an opportunity to make the call to make big tobacco pay, because the industry operates everywhere. I feel that participants here, particularly Willow's presentation regarding the Baltimore case, illustrates pretty clearly what could a cigarette leader produce, but also Debbie was very encouraging and give several examples regarding the plastic treaty and all what is going around. The WHO has also documented in several reports all the environmental costs. So, well, that's why all participants are conducting several activities during the week, and particularly on what regards to Environmental Day, I will want to close saying that the polluters pay principle that primarily has been applied for the environmental arena, I do not see why it could not be applied for the tobacco control space. And definitely here, I want to take the opportunity to make the invitation for everyone around the world who is thinking on how the industry could be held accountable to start making the connections with this principle within the spirit that is being conceived for, because also the industry takes advantage of all these concepts to put them out and say that they are paying for the harm, let's say like creating a specific fund for generating that, and that's not accountability, that's not liability. I will leave it there.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add? Any of the other speakers? Daniel, you mentioned polluter pays principle. And there is a question on that also, that it is important for governments to make big tobacco pay for all the harms its businesses are causing. And the polluter pays principle, has such an approach helped advance progress on other issues such as climate? Any of the speakers?
Hi, Shobha.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that.
Yes.
I think when it comes to the environment, the polluters pay principle is really very crucial because it's an accepted principle. For instance, when the member states or governments negotiate treaties, it's a given that they will allot some sort of mechanism to make sure that the polluters are paying. So if you look at the environmental treaties or environmental policies, there will always be some mechanism, whether they establish a fund or a tribunal where those who pollute are paying into, so that there will be a compensation to pay for the remediation in the environment. So that mechanism in place because of that principle. So in the case of tobacco, we don't necessarily have that, at least not in the sense of it is being done in the environment. And I think that is really missing. There is no reason why we shouldn't have a pool of funds to compensate victims or to compensate for the cause of damage to the environment. And that is a really important point in the discussion on liability. I think it's easy for us to just sort of chase the industry for whatever harms it causes, for whatever misconduct it does. But ultimately, I think it's going to be really, really important that when we think about liability of the tobacco industry, that we focus on compensating victims, compensating for harms in the environment. Finding the industry at fault on its own means very little if the penalties amount to peanuts compared to the scale of harms caused. So our goal should be always clear that we want to make the tobacco industry pay for the full cost of its products, not only for health, but also environment, and that we use whatever we have. The most powerful tools we have actually are in our policies, it's in the treaty, and to make sure that we use those legal tools to create very strong structures, whether it be a fund, a tribunal that's helping with the compensation of victims and the compensation for environment, or some other novel mechanism. That's whether we use, you could also call that compensation mechanisms, or you could do something very simple like taxes. What we do right now is impose taxes and allocate funding or dedicate funding for health promotion, for instance. So whether you use those kinds of mechanisms, taxes or compensation mechanisms, we should just really focus on how we could repair the harm. So we should not stop at finding fault with the industry or exposing its misconduct. We should make sure that there is compensation and there is remediation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question is that the Global Week of Action to make big tobacco pay is a very important strategic organizing. Are there plans to regularly monitor progress at domestic level as well as around the upcoming intergovernmental meeting of COP to FCTC? Because I think the person wants to ask that, will there be some monitoring mechanism also to see how well the actions are going to make big tobacco pay?
And I will encourage the other panelists to share, but in terms of the vision of the global campaign, yes, there will be several moments, and Kelsey already flagged. This year, we will not have international convening, as she was explaining. The Conference of the Parties will be taking place in 2027. So definitely it will require follow-up, particularly from civil society, as observers that we are for the treaty, to secure that not only the decisions that were adopted continue its track, but also that several of the actions, and I will here encourage my dear fellow panelists to jump into how they envision they will monitor the actions that they are currently leading on. But particularly for the Global Week of Action, in the website, we have also included a survey section. That section is quite simple, includes 6 questions that governments and anyone who is interested could be providing us information, and we hope to make specific cuts during the several parts of the year. The first one will start in October, the second one will be in December, the next one will be, and we will have 2 more cuts within the next year to double check the progress and also any other ideas that could be around that could strengthen the actions that this global movement is intended to promote. Yes. I will leave it there.
Okay.
I can jump in on a couple of things here, if that's okay.
Yes. Please.
So ASH and our partners around the world submit reports to human rights treaty bodies as a way to help with enforcement for tobacco control measures, because the COP doesn't have an enforcement mechanism. So one way that we work to ensure that this happens is we report to other human rights treaty bodies that do have an enforcement mechanism, like the Convention on the Rights of the Child or the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And we highlight tobacco as a substantive issue within their jurisdiction. So if anyone is interested in partnering to do that in your country, please reach out to me. We've worked with many of the people on this call in the past, and we really think it's an important way to highlight tobacco in the human rights system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I think we have already overshot our time. So with this, we come to the close of today's session, which marks the beginning of Global Week of Action to make big tobacco pay. My sincere thanks to all the speakers and the participants on Zoom as well as on YouTube for making this session happen through their active presence. Let us hope that the Global Week of Action to make Big Tobacco pay results in urgent actions by governments at domestic level, as well as with stronger progress on Article 19 of FCTC. We need the support of each one of you. Let us all join hands to amplify this call and make Big Tobacco pay. Thank you and namaste.